The year was 1848, and Blackwater clung to the edge of the Dartmoor marshlands like a secret too old to tell. Just a hamlet, really. No more than 27 houses, one leaning chapel, and the inn. The Blackwater Inn sat crooked at the end of Cobber's Hollow Lane, where the dirt path bent like a snapped bone. It was built of coarse granite and black lime plaster, its eaves drooping like a tired man's shoulders, and its windows oddly narrow, as if they had been made not to keep weather out, but to keep something else in. It was April when the screams started. A boy, Wesley Cotter, 12 years old and thin as chicken wire, was the first to hear them. He had been out in the pre-dawn, trudging with a dented milk pail through the stillness, when the wind shifted and carried the sound across the moor. He stopped. No birds, no rustling. Only the wind, and the unmistakable, unnatural sound of a man screaming from deep inside the earth. It wasn't a scream of surprise. It was the kind you hear when someone's already broken. Wesley dropped the pail. The metallic clang echoed once, twice, then disappeared into the mist like everything else did in Blackwater. By the time the villagers stirred, the scream had stopped, and yet those who lived nearest the inn swore they'd heard it too. The innkeeper, Mrs. Beryl Crane, was not one for gossip. Sharp in the eye and thin in lip, she'd inherited the inn from her father, who'd built it atop the ruins of something older, though no one remembered what. She claimed the inn had been empty all week. No guests, she told the parish warden, tapping her ledger with a gnarled finger, and certainly no screaming men. The ledger indeed was blank, but Wesley insisted, and he wasn't alone. Reverend Harrow, who lived in the rectory 2 fields over, reported hearing what could only be described as a human voice torn from the throat, though he admitted it might have been the wind or a fox. He avoided Wesley's eyes when he said it, but the inn stood quiet that day, and the next, until Wednesday, when Mrs. Eileen Ketteridge, the butcher's wife, while out collecting kindling behind the inn stables, stumbled upon something that didn't belong. A shoe. Just one. Black leather, elegant, untouched by mud, the kind no one in Blackwater could afford. Inside the shoe, wedged tightly against the insole, was a shard of paper, a torn scrap, blood-stained, the ink still legible beneath the rust-coloured blotch. "Don't open the door. It hears." That night, Wesley refused to speak. He sat wide-eyed by the fire, rocking with his knees tucked tight to his chest. By Friday, the townspeople were whispering. "It's just spring sickness," muttered Isaac Bullen, the cooper, between swigs of marsh gin. "Fog does things to the mind." But no one laughed, because this wasn't the first time the inn had drawn whispers. In 1836, a widow from Exeter was said to have vanished after renting a room upstairs, and in 1841, 2 German traders checked in and were never seen again. "Probably left," Beryl had said then. "Didn't like the mutton." But the mutton had nothing to do with the red stains beneath the floorboards, nor the smell that lingered in room 4 long after the windows were thrown open. They said the air never quite cleared. The constable came from Tavistock that Saturday. Constable Marcus Shaw, a barrel-chested man with heavy boots and a face like boiled leather. He interviewed Mrs. Crane, inspected the rooms, all empty, all clean, and returned to Tavistock unimpressed. "There's nothing here but old floorboards and scared chickens," he told the villagers. But he never opened the cellar. No one had, not in years. The iron key had been lost, or so Beryl claimed, and the stone door, half sunk into the ground near the rear kitchen, hadn't been touched since her father's time. No need to poke at bones, she said, and no one pressed her. That night, a low, rhythmic knocking echoed from beneath the inn. 3 knocks, silence, 3 more. The next morning, the butcher's dog was found dead, curled beside the back wall of the inn, its eyes wide, its teeth bared, and something pressed into its tongue. A coin, dated 1721. Rain began to fall on Sunday, slow, thick droplets, heavy as gilt. It painted the inn's walls in streaks, darkening the already black plaster until it gleamed like wet ash. The townspeople stopped passing the inn altogether. Wesley, who had once played by the stables, now avoided the entire road. Even Mrs. Crane stopped lighting candles in the windows. And on Monday, a new guest checked in. A man, tall, thin, with a gloved hand and a travelling case of dark leather. He signed no name. He carried no umbrella. And when asked which room he'd like, he simply replied, "The one nearest the knocking." Blackwater was a place where the land held its breath. After the stranger checked into the inn, no one saw him again. Not in the morning light, not at supper, not even when the fog peeled back enough to make out the shapes of the upper windows. Mrs. Crane claimed he was resting, a word that felt far too thin. But towns like Blackwater didn't run on fact. They ran on fragments, what the baker's daughter swore she saw, what the gravedigger wouldn't say aloud, what the postmaster found too unsettling to deliver. And soon, those fragments gathered into whispers. At the Cobb and Wren Dry Goods, 2 women whispered behind a bolt of fabric the colour of bruised plums. "He came with no horse," said Miss Agnes Thorne, who'd worked the till for 17 years. "And no boots, did you notice? Just leather slippers, damp as if he walked from the river," said Eleanor Pike, who hadn't slept in 2 nights. Behind them, a shelf of ledgers toppled without cause. No one reached to pick them up. The vicar, Reverend Harrow, tried to still the talk. On Tuesday evening, he called a meeting at the chapel, a low stone building barely held together by ivy and hope. 19 villagers came. Beryl Crane was not among them. He stood behind the pulpit, fingers gripping the edge like he feared the room itself might lurch. "We are a Christian town," he began, "and Christians do not barter with ghosts or fantasies." But when he called for prayer, no one bowed their head. They watched the door, because they all heard it then. 3 knocks, not at the door, but beneath them, muffled, heavy, rhythmic. And when Reverend Harrow looked down, he paled. Later, he would deny it, of course. But those who stood closest saw the faintest crack form across the flagstone floor near the altar, as if something old beneath it had shifted. The next morning, a torn page appeared nailed to the chapel door, held there by a square-headed iron spike none had seen before. It was a guest book entry, aged, frayed at the corners, and signed in a hand no one could read. But the date was clear, 24th March, 1799. The note read, "Third night. She has begun to speak through the walls. They are not her words, but she wears the voices well. No one knew who left it. The Reverend burned it that evening, but Miss Thorne swore the parchment did not curl in the fire. It just darkened, like something not quite ready to be gone." At the Blackwater schoolhouse, 3 pupils, ages 9, 10, and 11, began drawing the same image during their free slate lessons. A man in a tall coat, mouth covered, standing beside a tree that bled from its bark. When their instructor, Mrs. Penrose, asked what it meant, one child, Tommy Wicks, simply replied, "He watches from the room where no light sticks." The school closed the next day. By Thursday, even the skeptics began to fracture. Isaac Bullen, the cooper, who had laughed at the boy's screams just days ago, now refused to leave his shop after dark. He sealed his shutters with cross-marked boards and left a basin of salt at each window. "I heard him," he whispered to a customer. "He talks in the voice of someone I once knew. But dead now, long dead." When asked who, Bullen only said, "My father drowned in the canal. 1823. That voice came from his lungs. That evening, a group of 5 men, farmers, labourers, and the tanner's apprentice, gathered at the edge of Cobber's Hollow. Their plan was simple: force entry into the Blackwater Inn, confront the guest, and find whatever had been knocking. They never made it inside. As they approached, fog spilled low across the ground, not rising, but crawling, as though driven by thought. One man, Joseph Craigs, later told his wife he heard footsteps all around, but saw no one. They returned pale and empty-handed, but Walter Pikes, the tanner's apprentice, did not return at all. In his place, outside the inn's door the next morning, was a length of leather apron, neatly folded, and a second coin, this one dated 1718. Resting atop it like a paperweight, Mrs. Crane remained inside. When Constable Shaw was summoned again, he returned not with force, but with hesitation. This time, he didn't knock. Instead, he left a note. "Ma'am, please confirm Mr. Pike's safety. This is a formal request under Article 3. Failure to respond shall result in escalation." But no answer came. By Saturday, the whispers had shifted in tone. They no longer questioned what was inside the inn. They feared what might want to get out. In the village archive, a dusty vault of uneven shelves and split spines, Reverend Harrow found something he did not immediately share. It was a registry from 1782, listing land deeds and building plans. The record for the Blackwater Inn's plot showed a prior name: St. Tyburn's Correctional Asylum, East Wing, closed in 1779 due to unsanctioned methods and inmate vanishing. Its location matched exactly, but the plans were missing. In their place, an envelope, unmarked. Inside, a single photograph, a daguerreotype so early its details had nearly blurred away, but visible still. A woman in a white smock, hands bound, standing at the edge of what appeared to be a bricked-over well. In her lap, a sign scrawled in ink: "She would not sleep when told." Later that week, the butcher's youngest daughter, no more than 6, was found in the morning sitting on the inn's porch. No one had seen her leave the house. When they asked her why, she said plainly, "I heard my name from inside." But it was Mother's voice. Mother's been dead a year, she had no shoes. In her hand, a third coin. By the second Sunday, no one would take the road past the inn. The postmaster began rerouting deliveries. The chapel bells no longer rang, and in the silence that settled over Blackwater, something began scratching behind the walls of every home nearest the inn. It wasn't loud, just steady, like someone memorizing the layout from underneath. Her full name was Beryl Edith Crane, born 29th of November, 1798, in a township once called Widdermon Fell, which no longer exists on any current ordnance maps. The earliest surviving record of her life comes from the 1805 census, where she appears as Beryl E. Crane, age 6, listed under the household of one Maddox Crane, identified only as apothecary, retired, and landholder, deemed reclusive. The household had no mother listed, no siblings, only a third occupant marked with the single initial LH, unknown, relation to head of house, inherited. No other records exist for this L, In 1822, Beryl arrived in Blackwater with a battered trunk, a folding ledger stand, and a stack of deeds, some legitimate, others curiously signed but undated. She claimed her father had left to her the funds to purchase the inn after the previous owner, Mr. Herland Ditt, was found drowned in a marshy sinkhole some 12 yards behind the building. No formal transaction was ever filed, but the property was suddenly under her name by spring, stamped with a partial seal from the disbanded Royal Survey Office of Widham, defunct as of 1811. Locals recalled that she never celebrated holidays, never took communion, never married. Beryl Crane ran the Blackwater Inn for 26 years with the same 3 habits. She opened only 4 of the 11 rooms, rooms 2, 3, 5, and 7. The rest remained locked. She personally prepared every guest's bedding, even when help was offered. Once a month, on the new moon, she would light a single lantern and descend into the rear stairwell that led to nowhere visible. A bricked path she claimed led to spare storage. She never spoke during those visits, not even when addressed directly. Her personal effects were never catalogued. She kept no known family, wrote no will. But inside an 1839 tax envelope addressed to her name, discovered decades later in a Royal Archives backlog, an unusual slip of paper was found tucked behind the remittance stub, folded once, yellowed, fragile. Written in dark blue ink, the words were curved, ornate, unmistakably not Beryl's own hand. Her signature, from other documents, was square and blunt. The message read, "She remembers what the others forgot. The rooms are numbered for her voice." It was unsigned. The only known photograph of Beryl Crane comes from a tintype dated 1842, found in the effects of a travelling photographer from Exeter, who recorded his subjects in a wide range of localities across Devon. In the image, Beryl stands alone outside the inn's door, hands clasped in front of her black apron. But it's the window behind her, room 5, according to surviving floor plans, that draws attention. Through the distorted glass, a figure appears, blurry, indistinct, but unmistakably human, wearing a long coat and gloves. The photographer made a note in his log. Subject refused to speak. Paid with coin of old make. Eyes clouded. Avoided own reflection residents who knew her well, though few ever claimed to be close, recalled one detail consistently. She never slept in the inn. Her quarters were in the stables, converted from an old grain room lined with peat and stone. Inside she kept only a cot, an oil lamp, and a book of psalms copied by hand in a language no one could name. One page was bookmarked, always the same, Psalm 94:11, "The Lord knoweth the thoughts of man, that they are vanity." Yet the word Lord had been struck through in red ink, replaced with witness. In 1844, Beryl filed an official complaint with the Devonshire Constabulary that certain guests, when assigned room 7, complained of repeated whispering at night, though the inn was often empty and no other guests were registered at the time. She blamed acoustic seepage from the chimney flues, but in March 1845 she refiled, this time requesting that room 7 be removed from maps and no longer referred to as a guest accommodation. That same week, a travelling cleric named Thaddeus Wells, who had stayed at the inn only once, was found wandering the salt flats near Newton Abbot. Clothes torn, eyes milky. He repeated only one sentence. "There is no 7th room." There never was. There will always be. After that incident, Mrs. Crane hired no staff, no maids, no cooks, and no gravediggers. Though in 1847, a shallow pit was discovered behind the stables, partially filled with bone fragments, kerosene tins, and the remains of an 1810 style child's doll, sewn shut at the mouth with copper wire. She offered no explanation. She simply said, "We bury only what calls to be buried." The most disturbing document came not from the inn itself, but from the diary of Reverend Harrow, who kept irregular but deeply detailed entries in the years following his arrival in Blackwater. One entry, dated 2nd of October 1846, reads, "Visited Beryl today. She served broth with no scent, no steam. The room was thick with stillness, as if each object waited. I inquired of her dreams. She replied, 'Dreams are when the house rearranges us. It stacks us again. Sometimes I wake in a room I haven't seen in years.' She then asked if I still remembered my brother. I was an only child. The entry is followed by a single sentence, underlined twice. Her voice came from behind me. She never opened her mouth. And then, in January 1848, the ledger entries stopped. No more guests recorded, no local sightings, only a scrawled receipt for candle wicking and salt, purchased from Cobb and Wren. 6 pounds of salt, enough to circle a house, and then nothing, until the night Wesley Cotter heard the scream. When asked, Mrs. Crane claimed she never knew a man had checked in, yet she kept a room key beside her bed, tarnished, iron, marked with a faint carving, R.0, Room 0. A room never shown on the inn's floor plans, and on the underside of her cot, carved into the wood in a child's hand, the following was found: "The door doesn't open for you, it opens you." The first public event occurred on the evening of April 11th, 1848, under a low, greenish sky, just before the rains returned to Dartmoor. It was Reverend Harrow who documented it, though his account, scrawled hastily into the margin of an old confirmation logbook, was not found until decades later, sealed behind the panelling of the Blackwater Rectory's east wall. The passage reads, "At precisely 6:43 in the evening, the bell in the chapel began to toll, not as if pulled but strained, as if something inside the rope was pushing upward, resisting gravity itself. I was alone. I witnessed no hands on the bell pull, yet the bell tolled 3 times, and in the final note, I swear upon my life, I heard a voice echo through the iron, 'She's in the walls now.' No one believed him at first. Even Harrow himself, in the next line, questioned his senses. But then came the second event, documented, witnessed, and impossible to explain. April 13th, 1848, 2:15 a.m. The village awoke to the sound of a fire bell, not from the chapel, but from the tannery, whose iron triangle had not been struck in years. Residents rushed to the square, but there was no fire. There was cold. A perfect circle, 12 feet across, had formed in the tannery yard, a patch of earth brittle with frost, crackling underfoot like shattered shell. And in its center, a set of bare footprints, walking inward, not out, each print precise, each toe arched upward, as if the person who made them walked backwards. At the circle's center lay a folded cloth napkin, white, monogrammed BC, the same napkins used in the Blackwater Inn dining hall. Inside it, a small silver fork, scorched black at the tip. Word spread, fear grew, and still Mrs. Crane offered nothing. She had not been seen in 3 days. The inn's windows remained dark, but on the 4th day, a candle reappeared in room 3, flickering against the glass, though no one entered or exited the building. It burned for exactly 7 hours. The chimney produced no smoke. Then came young Edmund Pritchard, 11 years old, son of the village farrier, healthy, bright, and known for reciting sea shanties at the market on Thursdays On April 16th, he began to mutter Latin phrases in his sleep, though he had never studied the language. His mother, Agnes, kept notes, rough phonetic approximations. Later examined by scholars, the phrases matched excerpts from De Occulta Philosophia, a banned 16th century treatise on ritual bindings written by Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. Et lumen intus vocatur. Translation: and the light within is called. When awakened, Edmund didn't remember speaking, but he began to fear his own shadow, not because of its shape, but because, as he whispered once to his older sister, it listens harder than I do. Reverend Harrow, grasping for reason, summoned Dr. Tomswell, a physician from Tavistock, familiar with psychological disturbances. His report on the boy, later filed in the Devon County Register, makes chilling reading. Pupil dilation irregular, not reactive to lamplight. He exhibits no physical ailment, yet his heartbeat slows dramatically when asleep, below survivable thresholds. When I read aloud the phrase he speaks, he smiled and said, "That voice isn't mine. It borrowed me." Edmund was sent to live with his aunt in Cornwall, but 3 weeks later, the exact same phrases were heard muttered by a girl in the neighbouring village of Chaldon. She had never met Edmund. She died 2 nights later in her sleep, eyes wide open. Then came the death without cause. Samuel Griggs, a retired constable, had been one of the men who attempted to approach the inn that night. Walter Pikes disappeared. On April 21st, Griggs collapsed during breakfast. The coroner's report, one of the few formal documents that survives, lists massive internal hemorrhaging as cause of death. But the oddity was this: all major organs intact. No rupture, no trauma. Blood appears to have gathered in the chest cavity through no visible breach. As if drawn, pinned beneath his plate was a note, written in fine cursive. The rooms don't remember who built them, but they always remember who knocked. The ink had soaked through the plate's ceramic. By the end of April, the village held a vote: board the inn or burn it. Neither action succeeded. A group of 12 men approached with boards, hammers, and a crate of brine-sprinkled nails. But as they neared the inn's entrance, the earth shifted. The road itself, the dirt, the gravel, buckled outward as if exhaling. One man was thrown 6 feet back. Another began to vomit blood. The others fled. They left the boards where they fell. By morning, the boards were gone. Inside Blackwater's small records hall, a local librarian named Felicity Marin began to dig through the few surviving newspapers from the 18th century. What she found was a single column from the Exeter Morning Post, dated 18 February 1766. The headline read, "4 guests missing from Tyburn's East Wing. Rumours of voice walls denied by authorities." The text is damaged, but a section survives. Witnesses claim voices emanate not from mouths, but from corners of rooms, as though language itself had soaked into the wood. Guards refuse to enter room 0. No floor plan includes its location. The Tyburn Asylum, she realized, had occupied the very land where the Blackwater Inn now stood. Room 0 had been renamed Room 0, the same as the iron key beneath Beryl Crane's bed. In the final days of April, a thin sound began to hum through the fields at night. It was not a voice, not quite. More like a breath drawn in reverse, pulling everything towards something unseen. Animals grew sick, glass cracked, and on May 1st, the final witness account was written. It came from Reverend Harrow, though it was not signed. Found folded into the hymnal at his pulpit, it reads, "There was a man in the road tonight. He had no eyes, but he looked at me. He opened his mouth and I heard my own funeral sermon, word for word. I had never written one. On the morning of May 3rd, 1848, Blackwater changed, not in a single event, but in a shift, an atmospheric collapse, the kind of silence that arrives after something unspeakable has already happened. The livestock did not stir, the postmaster did not open his shutters, and the fog that rolled in that day did not burn off with the sun. By noon, 3 families had packed their wagons and left. The Millers, the O'Rourkes, and Miss Agnes Thorne, who had run Cobb and Wren for nearly 2 decades. No goodbyes, just closed doors and wheels in the mud. At the edge of the village square, Edith Cramley, age 9, sat on the stone well, singing a lullaby in a language no adult recognized. When asked what she was doing, she simply said, "Keeping the cellar closed." When pressed further, she repeated one phrase. The man with the gloves doesn't like silence. He needs a song to walk through that same day. Her father, a former Navy midshipman, was found in the family barn, eyes missing, chest collapsed inward like wet paper. There were no signs of struggle. Pinned to his forehead, a linen tag marked with red thread. One word, interrupted. The town's remaining men attempted to organize a rotation, watch shifts, signal bells, but time began to fray. Several reported missing hours, gaps in memory from dusk until morning. Elias Gant, the candlemaker, awoke in the chapel loft, with his feet washed clean and bound in coal wax. 3 used matchsticks beneath his tongue. His account was the most coherent. I followed my own voice into the woods. It was speaking faster than I could think. When asked if he had dreamt it, Elias replied, "No, sir. Dreams leave when you wake." This followed me back. Fear turned inward. Townsfolk stopped speaking after sunset. Letters were left outside doorways, sealed with salt. The baker refused to sell bread made with hollow crusts. And in the tavern, Thomas Kettridge took to hammering a single nail into the wall beside his seat every evening, saying, "It marks where I was, in case I come back wrong." The Reverend called a final town meeting on May 7th. Only 9 people attended. They met in the schoolhouse, neutral ground. The chapel was deemed unsafe. No candles were lit. Only oil lamps, placed in a triangle on the floor. In the meeting notes, preserved in the Reverend's second ledger, now kept in the Devon archives, his first entry reads, "We are not alone in this town. But what walks among us is not new. It is remembered by the land they discussed options, petitioning the bishopric, summoning officials from Plymouth, evacuating entirely. But none had the means to leave quickly. The inn remained closed. The candle in room 3 lit again that night, but this time there was no flame, only a glow, white and cold, like moonlight poured through bone. The next disappearance occurred on May 8th. Dorcas Hale, the village midwife, vanished during a house call. The child she had delivered, healthy, 6 pounds, was found alone in the cradle, eyes open, silent. Pinned to the swaddling cloth was a brittle page torn from an 1812 medical manual. On spectral parturition, some say wombs may remember prior tenants. That memory may return in flesh not born of them. Dorcas was never found. The baby died 2 days later, still cold, though its body showed no signs of decay. Emotionally, the town fractured. Old arguments returned, family feuds, unpaid debts, suspicions of betrayal. But they felt artificial, like someone had scripted them, and the people were merely reciting. One villager, Clara Lind, noted in her diary, "My mother and I fought this morning. Over nothing. It felt placed, as if we were told to argue. After, I found her crying in the pantry, saying she didn't remember speaking at all. That evening, Clara walked into the Blackwater marshes. She left her boots on the steps of her home, facing inward. They were filled with brine. 3 days of rain followed. The third day, the inn's front door stood ajar. No wind, no footprints. Just the door, open 3 inches, and a faint trail of white dust leading from it toward the church. Inside the church, a single page was found tucked into the Bible at Ecclesiastes 12. And the dust returned to the earth as it was, and the spirit shall return unto God who gave it. But in this copy, the verse had been altered. God was scratched out, overwritten. Guessed. Mrs. Crane was seen again on May 13th, standing in the upstairs window of room 5, not moving, not blinking, just watching. The fog did not obscure her. It parted around her shape. When a child pointed at her face, they asked what she looked like. The child said, "She has her mouth behind her eyes." No one approached the inn that night. In the village square, a gallows appeared. No one claimed to have built it. The wood was older than anything in town, dark, slick, unweathered. The rope was clean. The noose was tied in a sailor's blessing knot, used historically to keep a soul from wandering after death. Pinned to the post, "For the one who hears too much." By May 15th, only 11 villagers remained. The others were either gone, dead, or locked inside their homes, their windows sealed with mud and oilskin. One final note arrived that night. Slipped beneath the chapel door, it was written on the back of a 1788 receipt for stone shipments to the Tyburn Asylum. In a child's hand, it read, "The rooms are not in the house. The house is in the rooms. She sleeps to keep the door closed, but she is tired." It was unsigned, but tucked into the fold was a 4th coin, older than the rest, worn smooth on one side. The other side bore a symbol not of any known mint. A woman without a face, holding an open door. The truth did not arrive in thunder. It came in fragments, folded pages, dust-covered ledgers, marginalia smudged by age and damp. On May 17th, 1848, Felicity Marin, the part-time archivist and former schoolteacher, broke into the abandoned record hall in Tavistock, using a broken tobacco knife and a lockpick borrowed from her late father's watch case. She had not slept in days. She found what she was looking for beneath a warped drawer, labelled Tea Burials 1760 to 1800. Inside, a bound report from 1774 titled plainly, "Observations from the East Wing concerning the spatial disruptions of Room Nought." Stamped with the now defunct seal of the Tyburn Board of Inspection, the report's paper was thin, its ink faded, but its contents suggested something deeply wrong had been hidden for generations. Excerpt: "The space does not align with physical boundaries. Doors reappear elsewhere. Dimensions within fluctuate depending on who enters first. Those who sleep inside speak in tongues not of their knowledge. Many describe a woman humming in the walls, staff instructed to rotate beds every 3rd day to confuse the witness. This appears to delay events. Room Nought is not to be entered alone. Final recommendation: seal permanently, remove from plan, deny its existence." The final page included a floor plan of the East Wing, hand-drawn in graphite. Room Nought was marked as a small square set between rooms 3 and 5, the exact same location as room 4 at the Blackwater Inn. But the architect had crossed it out with thick strokes of charcoal. Over the space, he had written, "Void, let the numbering deceive," but never unlocked the 4th room. Back in Blackwater, Reverend Harrow had begun his own excavation. He returned to the Blackwater Inn alone, at dusk, on May 18th, carrying only a travelling lamp and a thick Bible wrapped in rope. He entered through the cellar. What he found was documented in his final letter, later found unopened beneath a loose floorboard in the chapel's apse. Letter, never sent, to Bishop Hadley of Exeter, May 18th, 1848. Your Grace, I believe I have made an error of judgment in failing to act sooner. The inn is no longer inert. Something beneath has awakened. I descended the rear stair, what Mrs. Crane once called her storage corridor. But there is no corridor. There is only a spiral, a narrow stone spiral that descends further than the building allows. There are no landings, only breath, mine and another's. It is not wind. It waits when I wait. At the fifth turn, I found a wall of scratched plaster. No door, but pressed into it, at chest height, was a perfect handprint. Too small for a man, too long for a woman. The wrist was wrong. I placed my hand near it and heard a voice, but not outside. It was inside my chest. It asked, "Have you spoken of the room?" I turned back. I do not know if I left the way I entered. The light from my lamp remained fixed behind me, though I walked toward it. I do not believe Beryl Crane built the inn. I believe she was left to watch it. She did not own the key. She was the lock. I will not return. I pray no one does. He was last seen the following day, at dawn, walking into the marsh barefoot. His hat was later found on the chapel step. Inside it, a folded page torn from his Bible, missing only one verse, Matthew 27:52. And the graves were opened. The ink had been peeled off, not erased, not scratched, peeled like dried skin from vellum. A week later, Felicity Marin made a second discovery. Buried beneath decades of coal tariffs in the Devon County Council ledgers, she located a shipment receipt from June 1771, signed by the warden of Tyburn Asylum, R.J. Crowthorne. It was brief: 16 stones of mortar, 2 wagon loads of brick, 1 crate, cast iron numerals, 4 quiet room. The invoice was unusual, not for what it included, but for what it omitted. There was no billing, address, and the shipment was signed by a man who, records later confirmed, had died the year prior, in 1770. Felicity contacted no one. She was last seen boarding a coach to Truro, holding a rolled copy of the asylum floor plan in her hands. The coach arrived. She did not. Her seat was empty. On the cushion, a small square of iron, stamped with the numeral 4. Meanwhile, the Blackwater Inn remained sealed, or so the villagers believed. But according to the final maintenance register from that spring, dated May 28, 1848, someone, identity unknown, filed a request for room 4 to be reopened. The form was stamped, signed, and accepted by the old district engineer's office in Totnes. Yet that office had burned down in 1832. What finally brought the historical record to a halt was not death or vanishing, but silence. After May 31st, 1848, there are no surviving documents from Blackwater, no birth records, no letters, no property filings, tax logs, or land transfers, only absence. Even maps from 1850 onward show no settlement by that name in the area. Where Blackwater had once been, modern survey maps list only boundary marsh, uninhabited. C. 1812. Ordnance survey, withdrawn. But the last clue, perhaps the most disturbing, was not found in Devon at all. In 1894, during renovations at Ashcombe Hall, a manor house in Gloucestershire, builders discovered a sealed cabinet behind a false wall in the library. Inside was a leather-bound journal, brittle and iron-smelling. Its first entry reads, "She has taken another name now." But the inn remains, always the same. Only the number changes. Each time she wakes, a different town forgets it ever had a fourth room. Beneath this, a name written in red ink. Beryl Edith Crane. The entry is dated 13th August 1848. No document records the night of 3rd June 1848. No diary, no ledger, no church log. But what happened in Blackwater that night was reconstructed from a bundle of pages, water-damaged and bound with rusted twine, discovered beneath a flagstone in room 4 during a 1922 archaeological survey of the Dartmoor floodplain. The survey itself did not name the location, only noting the remains of a large granite structure with foundations consistent with early 19th century inn construction. The bundle was labelled in chalk, "Witness Accounts Final Turn." What follows is a compilation of those records, scattered, fragmented, but chillingly consistent. Entry: Thomas Ketteridge, blacksmith, age 43. We gathered in the chapel, 6 of us, myself, Agnes Cotter, young Elias, and 3 others I could not name. I think they were townsfolk once. One wore the baker's apron, but had no face I knew. The candle in room 3 had turned blue. The sky outside was white, not with fog, but with absence. Sound did not travel. When the bell rang in the square, it was like watching thunder with no thunder. We held hands. We recited the Lord's Prayer. Halfway through, the floor cracked beneath us. Something below repeated the prayer in reverse, syllable by syllable entry. Unnamed child. Handwriting shaky, small. I saw Mama, but not her eyes. They were doors. I looked in. I saw her old. I saw her bones. She whispered to me, "Don't speak of the fourth room. It's listening." I woke up in the walls. The wallpaper was inside me. Entry: E. C. Presumed Edith Cramley. The knocking stopped, but something else started. A kind of weeping, but not sad, not human, like timber weeping. It came from every corner. The inn opened itself. All the rooms at once, doors swinging like teeth. We entered room 4 because the others were gone. This last entry is interrupted by a drawing, crude charcoal lines, a floor plan, identical to the one Felicity Marin had recovered from the Tyburn archives. But in this version, room 4 is drawn as a spiral. At its centre, a symbol repeated on every surviving coin from the inn. A faceless woman, holding an open door. Multiple entries refer to a final event, what witnesses called the folding. It appears to have happened precisely at 2:19 a.m., according to a broken mantel clock found in the rubble, its minute hand bent into the dial. All accounts describe some form of spatial collapse. The hallway stretched backward. The room rose around us like a throat. The ceiling turned into water. We were not standing. We were remembered. One account, possibly from Isaac Bullen, makes mention of a ritual. Mrs. Crane stood in the centre. No longer old, younger now, hair down, dress red, not blood, but thread. She began to hum the song all the children knew, the one with no words. As she hummed, the floor around her blackened, smoke without fire. She opened her arms, and the walls opened too. Inside them, mouths, not faces, just mouths. And they began to retell the events of our lives, backwards. When they reached our birth, the screaming started. It was ours. A final, unclaimed account states there were no exits, only more doors, and each door opened to the same room. The numbers changed, but the room remained. We were in room 0, room 0, room 4. We were in the room that keeps names. And she asked us, "Who told you this place was ever yours?" I did not answer. But I wept, and it echoed for years. When a military cartographer visited the moor in 1852, commissioned to redraw the area for new rail lines, he noted, "Ruins found near Cobber's Hollow, foundation stones only. A peculiar hush persists in the air. Compass fails to align. Locals speak of no such place." He recorded no name for the location, only a mark in red pencil. "Caution, area folds." The final known object tied to the Blackwater Inn appeared in a museum inventory in 1979, mislabeled as unknown devotional item. It was a brass door key with teeth too intricate to serve any modern lock, stamped on its handle, R.O., Room 0. It now resides in the back storage of a private collection, unavailable to the public. Requests for further access have been denied. What remains of Blackwater? Very little. The land itself has been swallowed by peat. Trees do not grow there. GPS coordinates flicker and misalign. Photographs taken in the area blur at the edges, and sound recordings return with gaps, like erased cassette tape. But some insist they've heard the voice. Hikers, surveyors. A group of geology students in 1998 who camped unknowingly on the ridge above where the inn once stood. They all reported the same experience. A woman's voice humming softly. A moment of deep internal cold. And then, from the darkness, 3 slow knocks. Blackwater does not appear in any census records after 1848. The name was stricken from county registries, church rolls, and postal directories. Even in Devon's 1851 ecclesiastical realignment, when dozens of parishes were reclassified, Blackwater was omitted, not as defunct, but as if it had never existed. It was not absorbed, it was erased, and yet pieces remain. In 1911, during a land dispute in southern Dartmoor, a local solicitor named Clemens Wright stumbled upon an old boundary map inside the Totnes probate office. The map was drawn in 1794 by the estate surveyor of the Tyburn Hospital Trust. It showed clearly a large rectangular plot marked Sanatorium Grounds, Restricted East Wing, Vaulted Cellar Access. Directly beneath the plot was a hand-drawn note in older ink, clearly added later. Blackwater. Do not re-register. Let sleeping rooms rest. The handwriting matched that of Archibald Herland Ditt, the innkeeper who reportedly drowned in 1822, 20 years before Beryl Crane arrived. But Ditt's death record is signed by the same hand. Further clues emerged during the archaeological boom of the 1920s, when war veterans returned to rural England and, in search of work or meaning, began digging into the past, literally. In 1927, amateur historian Harold Stenton, a retired schoolmaster, recorded the following in a letter to the Devon Historical Society. I visited the supposed site of Blackwater with 2 young lads from Tavistock. What we found was unlike any ruin I've surveyed. The stones were not collapsed but placed, as if gently returned to the earth. Beneath them, we found a metal pipe. Not plumbing. Smooth iron unmarked. It ran horizontal for 7 yards, then vanished into the soil. From inside it, we heard a faint ticking. The lads believed it was water, but I've never known water to tick. The pipe was sealed the next day by town officials citing health hazard concerns. And then there's the matter of the children. From 1951 to 1978, 5 unrelated children, each adopted, each living in different counties, were documented speaking a near-identical bedtime rhyme, according to interviews collected by British folklorist Dr. Eileen Markham. The rhyme is not found in any published collection prior to the mid-20th century. Yet the structure, rhythm, and phonetics remain consistent across all 5 sources. It goes, "Knock, knock, knock, the room is near, hide your name, and plug your ear, doors are hungry. Walls grow teeth. Say her name and lose what's underneath." None of the children could explain where they learned it. Each claimed it came through the chimney. In 1994, a collapsed culvert exposed a section of brick tunnel during construction on the A386 bypass near Lidford. While the discovery was dismissed as part of an abandoned mine shaft, 2 features stood out. The bricks were dated to the 1770s, but bore contemporary scorch marks, as if burned recently. A metal sign, half buried in mud, was recovered from the site. Though rusted and bent, experts were able to reconstruct its wording. "This door is not an exit. This door is a memory." The sign now resides in a private collection in Exeter. Its authenticity is contested. Of the 11 remaining villagers from Blackwater's final month, none appear in public records after 1849. Their graves do not exist. No known descendants have been verified. Only Agnes Cotter's name appears in an 1850 Devonshire bank ledger, recorded once in a £5 withdrawal. The line is annotated, paid in person, eyes shut, hands gloved. Most unsettling of all is the journal recovered from Ashcombe Hall in 1894. The one whose first entry is dated 13th August 1848 and signed by Beryl Edith Crane. It contains 7 entries in total. Only one has been confirmed to be in her hand. The final entry, undated, is written in a style that suggests multiple voices, or a voice speaking through the writer. It reads, "There is no Blackwater. There are only places where a door has been left open too long. She wakes when a room is misnamed. When walls forget what they were built to hold, there are 11 keys, one for each guest who spoke too much. They ring themselves, the door is not behind us, it is ahead. The key is not iron, it is memory. Do not map this place, do not speak of it. But if you must, knock 3 times. And so we are left with silence. The inn is gone. The villagers are gone. The earth has reclaimed what little evidence remained. But the story persists, because stories always survive when memory fails. Perhaps Beryl Crane was never a woman, not truly. Perhaps she was a custodian, a lock, a placeholder for something older, faceless, and bound by architecture. Or perhaps she was only a frightened girl, left to guard a door no one should open. The coordinates of Blackwater are not marked. Its records are scattered and redacted. But if you find yourself walking the Dartmoor marshes and you feel an old foundation stone beneath your feet, if your shadow begins to slow, if a door appears where no door should be, then remember, room 4 was never meant to be entered. And still, somehow, we did. Thank you for joining us on this descent into the forgotten. If this story made you pause, shiver, or question the rooms you know best, consider subscribing for more unsettling investigations into history's darkest corners. There are many doors left to open, some already ajar.